Hey everybody, welcome to Life on Life's Terms. It's episode 56. Kenny and Justin in the studio today with a very special guest. We are going to get into some of the societal issues that we faced here in Edmonton, Alberta that may be prevalent around the world as well. And we have one of our local heroes here who is going to be sharing his story and experience, and you may be able to utilize some of his information to apply in your city. But before we get started, I'd like to give a shout out to Liam Connolly at Connolly Law for all your Canadian law and will estates or media issues. Google Liam Connolly Law. So let's get started in the show. I'd like to welcome everybody to meeting Mr. Dan Johnstone.
Well, thank you for calling me by my real name. Most people just call me by Can Man Dan.
Okay.
And they forget my real name. I'm kind of like the Eminem Cher complex where you get to be known by your nickname.
By your alias.
Yeah, exactly. More or less.
Kenny and I may be able to empathize with that. I think for a long time, that's all we were ever really known by was AKA names from either EPS or other people known.
Oh, hey, there you go. Hey, man, it works. It's okay.
Not anymore, though.
Not anymore. They actually know my real name now. And I'm not afraid of it.
Do they call you sir, mister,
Now
doctor?
they do. Now they do. Before they used to just be like, "Hey, you piece of shit," right? like literally,
put your hands up.
Yeah, get on the floor. yeah. You know this dance.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah. So, I think. So, how is it? Where did you start? Basically, like, what was your interest in societal issues? I guess.
Oh, and I sigh because it's a long, long story.
We've got the time, my friend.
I know. Growing up, my family and I were very, very poor.
Mm-hmm.
And I've told the story on, 100 different podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say it again here because just it's not that I get tired of, talking about it. It's just I'm just tired of reliving the past,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. I mean, those years were not fun for my family and I.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we couldn't afford, if we bought food, we couldn't pay the power.
Yeah.
Or if we paid the power, we couldn't do the water. And cable was a luxury. Telephone service was a luxury. And you know what? I get it. It was a different time because, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, it really was.
Yeah.
And so, I grew up in this, single parents, single mother. My dad was very abusive to my mom and left the family eventually. And we really, really struggled as a family because not that I'm here to, talk politics or criticize the government, but a single mom on welfare or a single mom getting, social services, it sounds like a nice thing, but it barely pays for anything.
Yeah.
So I've been working since I was, 12, 13, under the table, and got an official job. And it was a hard time. Really has just been a hard time. And we struggled and struggled and struggled. And eventually I turned 18 and got a full-time job as a, construction worker, pushing a broom. And we started to make ends meet. But that 18-year period where I was just in school was tough because, my mom would work 2-3 jobs at a corner store. She didn't have, the best education per se. And it was just about surviving. It really was. And we'd utilize, services like the Edmonton Food Bank and different things, community leagues.
So you are a local boy then to Edmonton? Yeah.
Born and raised, and I think I'm going to stay. And, actually, I'm probably jumping way ahead because my philanthropy work is kind of superseding me here. But Edmonton is my city.
Yeah.
And I owe a great gratitude to Edmonton. Honest to God, I do. Because they took care of my family and I when we maybe didn't deserve it. Maybe we didn't. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, why help this single mom and 2 boys when we could be doing better things with our money, right? So, I mean, Edmonton is really taking care of us. And it's kind of like, I feel like it's my responsibility. I know I'm saying like a lot, like I'm a, you're
a newbie.
A junior high girl in high school, but Edmonton has been really good for just my family, and I want to keep the cycle going, more or less.
So I think one of the things. So I'm not originally from Edmonton.
I am.
Kenny is.
Yeah.
That's why I like Kenny.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I would say is Edmonton has now become my home.
Mm-hmm.
For a long time, people would say, "Well, how long have you been here for?" And I'd say, "Too long." Right? Like it was time to go. You know.
And I'm just going to interrupt you there for a
Yeah.
second, because Edmonton gets such a bad rap.
It does.
It really does. And I'm in a great relationship with a nice young lady from Toronto. Actually, I've dated several ladies from Toronto, and they come here to Edmonton and they say, you know what, it's not as bad as everyone says it is.
It's not.
It feels like Edmonton's like the death capital of the world, and once you come here, you get murdered.
That was only
and
that one
are
year.
robbed.
Yeah, it was only that 1 year.
Exactly, but it sticks, right? It's a first impression.
Yeah.
So I'm from Montreal originally, basically, and now I don't think I could leave Edmonton. I'm pretty embedded into the community now.
Yeah.
And I like it now. I've talked behind the scenes of if this podcast were to ever move out of this city.
To where? Calgary?
No, Toronto or
Toronto.
Vancouver.
Oh, boo.
But I don't think that it would actually move. We'd probably just take it on the road as a show, right?
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, I do feel your love now for Edmonton. I think a lot of the issue personally for me with Edmonton was I was in active addiction when I was here.
Yeah.
So I hated everything in this city just because, it was Edmonton that was keeping me drunk. It wasn't me keeping me drunk. So that was one of the issues I had with Edmonton. But outside of that, I mean,
yeah,
I have a good relationship with the city today.
Well, now that you've learned accountability, you can't blame it on the city.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And I'm gonna. This is kind of what I do with podcasters. I kind of steer them off course. But Edmonton traditionally is a blue collar city.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And the higher ups, the white collars live in Calgary, and somehow we make the province work. But Edmonton likes to have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of areas where you can go to have fun. There's a lot of cheap drinks and different nights that you can have fun. But when it comes down to it, and this is why I stay, because oh my gosh, now I'm getting like off on my own tangent of a tangent of a tangent. But Edmonton really does take care of its citizens.
Yeah.
This is a great place to start a family. Housing is incredibly cheap, especially today.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
now.
compared to
2018.
Toronto or Vancouver. Yeah.
Exactly. And there are jobs available. Sure, it might be pushing a broom or packing a box or, do something laborious, but Edmonton is a fantastic city if you're an up-and-coming family who just wants to, provide for
It's
itself.
growing rapidly too, so it's good for business too and entrepreneurs.
I mean, I think one of the things that I definitely saw when I first came into Edmonton, just to kind of rein us back a little bit, was how transient this city is.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that is because of like either you're going to Vancouver or you're going to Fort McMurray, but not many people are staying here. So being an outsider coming into the city, what I found being in this city was those who are from here, born and raised, they're more reluctant to accept those who have come in from the outside because they may be leaving this area, right? And one of the things that I noticed societally because of the transientness of this city is like when it comes to homelessness, so on and so forth, you have, and I worked at George Spady, like I've worked in the homeless shelter here in Edmonton. For those of you who are listening and don't know what George Spady is, the one thing that I noticed is that there's a lot of transient homeless and displaced people because the social fabric when you first get here is a little bit trickier or maybe a little bit more difficult to find those services. And I think a lot of that is because Edmonton has been transient for so long, right? Yeah. Since the gold rush Klondike days, Edmonton has literally been transient that long.
Yeah, we're like a hub.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are. And that's the perfect word to describe it. We are a hub for people from the East Coast, people from the West Coast. People want to find jobs who are on the verge of homelessness. They come to Edmonton because there's jobs.
And don't forget the Americans.
And
a lot of Americans come here
Yes.
because they're going to Alaska.
Yeah.
Not kidding you. Like this is, or they're going to the Yukon, right? Like they come here for the diamond mines. This is their hop to that northern area, right?
And that's why I think that, Edmonton just gets a bad rap because we have so many people coming and going. Even, friends that I have personally have just left the city just because it's a hub.
Yeah.
Like there's no future here, but, people like me work to make this city a viable city.
People like us, Dan.
People exactly. Yeah, there you go. That's right. The number one podcast in the world.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah.
You got it. So let's talk a little bit. So obviously childhood was pretty rough.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I'm sure that a lot of our listeners, even Kenny and myself, can
relate,
empathize to that for sure. Past episodes we've gone into that, Kenny and I.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I like to dive into is like what your background is in regards to education, so on and so forth. Because you said you went into construction, right? So how did you make the leap from that into philanthropy work?
Well, okay. So basically with me is I, for some reason, my mom put me in a Christian, kind of a private school sort of thing, which is a big debate for Alberta politics right now because people do want to defund them or fund them. And I'm kind of on the fence because I came from a Christian school. And of course, we were taught about, creationism and God being placed above science, and it is what it is. So I went there, and honest to God, I mean, I fully credit them, and I'm not even religious right now because I'm more of a agnostic than anything. And so she put me there, and I went through the cycle, graduated, got my diploma, and then took 1 year post-secondary, and Mom got super, super ill. And I understand why, because, just as you get older, I mean, your body can only handle so much stress and so much, thinking throughout the day, like, where's the next meal coming from? How are we going to pay this bill? Are they going to turn this off? Can I provide for my kids? So she really broke down. And so I went for 1 year post-secondary, left because she got literally, like, bedridden. And the best job I can find for, at the time, I think minimum wage was like $7.20 or whatever it was. I found a job for $18, and it was pushing a broom and cleaning up after people. And I hated it. I still hate it because I don't think any sweeping up after anybody else. And it just came down to how am I going to bring in money for the family? Mm-hmm. So I brought in the money, brought in the paychecks. I could pay for some of the drugs that, my mom was taking that weren't covered by the government, which was nice. And I could buy, not the best food, but at least food for my family where, we could eat every night and just, be dependent on each other. And then it continued and I got promoted and promoted and promoted and promoted. So, I just got laid off this year. As of 8 days ago?
Oh wow!
Yeah, I seen it online, and then I shot you. I was like, "Well, this guy's got some free time. Maybe you'd like to come on the show."
Exactly. Yeah, and you know what? I'm totally fine with it because Edmonton experienced such a boom where it's hard to keep up with housing, and it's hard to keep up with just the demand of people who are coming here. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a whole nother discussion. But I've always been just kind of a blue collar guy. Mm-hmm. And, I'm one of those guys kind of like, Larry the Cable Guy or someone like that who is blue collar, who just, somehow, gets famous. And maybe it's my story, but I started the whole Can-Man Den thing because I was making that good money. Mm-hmm. So it started out going door to door. I would just knock on neighbors' doors and say, hey, I'm collecting for the food bank or a homeless shelter or a soup kitchen or like a youth shelter, anything. Mm-hmm. And honest to God, it was like lightning striking a tree. It was very fast and I guess spontaneous because people started to join in. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, fast forward 7 months later when I started door knocking by myself, it was businesses involved and people involved and media involved. And I was like an overnight celebrity. And, since 2011 to now, 2018, October, I've been able to raise millions for the, same families that, were in my former situation, right? So, I don't claim to know everything because honest to God, like I know honestly nothing. And it just comes down to just kind of supporting, just people in need because life is so long and life in general is stressful. So if I can, take this money and this food and these resources and just help you out just a bit, I think that's kind of. I don't mind doing that because people did that for me.
Yeah, 100%. That's very noble of you.
No, it's not.
No, it is, though. It is. Like, to be able to be comfortable where you are now and then focus the majority of your attention on helping other people make it through the struggles that you did, like, that's something to be said. And, like, Justin and I are both in the same area, like, for you, the food bank helped out a lot. For us, for him, it was 12-step. Now he's running seminars and like running people through 12 steps. He's like a sponsor, like probably like 20 different people. Yeah, probably way too much time involved in that.
Well, I would suggest this too is like, so I think we all have this story, and I like to throw this idea around because I think we've all been to this place, and this is where the inner philanthropist kind of ignites. So I'm just going to say this story, and I think we'll all be able to sit in the same place. So I used to do like Christmas delivery for Windhouse, which is Women in Need.
Oh, I love Windhouse.
Okay.
I'm going on the record. Make sure you pop up Windhouse.
Yeah. So
great people.
I used to go do their Christmas drop off. So Windhouse, for those who haven't heard out there, Windhouse is basically for women who are in need. That's what WIN stands for. And it's basically single parent moms for the most part with children who are just getting on their feet going into a new housing situation. Literally from a shelter where this is the only shelter in the Edmonton area who will take a family in. Kids, not typically the husband, but the kids and the mom at the same time. And then they'll help them get into independent living situation afterwards. So basically what I was doing was I was running around before Christmas time doing the drop-off donations, right? Mm-hmm. And I remember this one particular place that I went to. I was standing there and giving the boxes, Christmas trees, all of the presents, because this particular family really had nothing. Right. And I remember being a kid myself and my mom getting that same donation package from at that time was the Knights of Columbus, where we were in that geographical area. And by time I turned around and walked out of that apartment, I got into my vehicle and I just started crying. Mm-hmm. And the big part of that was I had realized that it just went full circle. I was the recipient, and now all of a sudden, I'm the guy, and I'm not doing it for recognition. I'm not doing it to keep, like you had said.
Thank you.
I'm not doing it for recognition. I'm not doing it to keep it as an inventory as what I have done. Therefore, I'm good. That I'm not doing it for that purpose either. Mm-hmm. The only reason why I'm saying this story is because I would suspect that between the three of us, we've all been in that place where it's almost like a light bulb goes off and you're like, yeah, we just went round the circle. Like we just went full circle. Right. So I would ask you if you had that exact moment. Like if you ever
I did.
Okay.
And I relived that moment almost, weekly, to be honest. And your story, I think, is, and maybe I'm a nationalist or an uber Canadian, but I think that's what we need. That's what Canada's founded on, is generosity. I mean, back to the wars, we were peacekeepers. Canadians have always been generous and have their pockets open and taking care of their neighbors, one another. But of course, with social media, things get different.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was my original intent, was I never wanted to be famous. I never wanted to have a name. I didn't want this stupid Wikipedia page about me or these articles about me.
Yeah.
But it just happened.
Yeah.
Okay, so fine. Now, you know what? Even doing a podcast with you. If I was just Dan Johnston, I'm sure you guys wouldn't request me to be here, which is okay because quite frankly, I like to just watch Netflix and just kind of Game of Thrones it. But you know what? I had a light bulb moment because for 18 years, strangers, people who I remember their faces but not their names, took care of my family and I and my brother for, 18, 20 years.
Yeah.
And I can never thank them.
Yeah.
I don't know who they are. I can't look them up in the phone book because phone books are dying. It's just a weird thing. So I said, you know what? I'm just, if people like that can invest in my family and I to keep the cycle going, that puts, kind of the cinder blocks on my shoulders.
Yeah.
So I did just that. I kept the cycle going, that wheel moving, because it's my responsibility. Because I can guarantee, I can guarantee because I've seen the kids and families that I've touched.
Yeah.
But you see all these families and it just becomes,
momentum
and kind of euphoric because you kind of see the changes you're making. And you just hope, because I'm not going to live forever. Mm-hmm. God knows I eat way too much fast food and stuff like that. So my heart might give out during this interview if I'm lucky. and it just comes down to hopefully those kids can see what I'm doing and keep the cycle going, because it's so important. We can't, and I'm not anti-government because I'm for politics.
Yeah. But
imagine if we left every social issue down to the government. Where would we be?
Yeah.
It comes down to that. So community leaders, philanthropists, people who go out of their way to make a difference, those people in my mind should, get that special place in heaven. And honest to God, it's they're heroes. They really are heroes. They're like the men and women who are fighting, overseas and, bullets, flying and ricocheting off their helmets, and they're heroes because they invest their own money, and we all know money makes the world go round. If you have no money, well then, hey, you're on the line accepting soup from a kitchen, right? Yeah. So, I mean, those people are heroes who put their family at risk, and I'm one of those idiots. So,
So Kenny, what was your turnaround moment?
My turnaround moment was I had a mentor. I was in custody, and we were going over this program on self-development and transformation, on reprogramming our subconscious minds, and making the shift from addictive and criminal mindsets to something that's productive and giving back at the same time, and something that has a moral compass and standards and is good of nature. And when I was in this program, I seen it affect a whole bunch of people around me, and have these guys, when I was in custody, start changing their belief systems. And it doesn't happen overnight, but when I seen hope for other people, I said, I'm going to make sure that I make that change for myself in order so I can help other people do the same thing. Yeah. And so since that day, we've been creating different programs and stuff to help guys get out of jail, to go into treatment, and help individuals make these transformations so they can be that individual for their family that they've been lacking, right? All the men in jail, the majority of them have kids, and so the more people that we can keep out and help them make that positive transformation,
exactly,
we're uniting families and bringing families together. And basically just me leveraging my story and my story of change has brought me in front of government officials, speaking engagements, right? And just numerous people coming up to me thanking me for being that story, because they say, if you can do it, then I can do it. Yeah. And now there's a following, and it's creating a movement of people that are trying to do better for themselves and help as many other people do good too. Yeah.
Well, you just kind of proved my case in point with your story. I mean, you know what, the government is what it is, but it takes people, to go over and above to make change. And your story is going over and above. I mean, you don't have to do that, but you were in that situation that I was, and you went over and above because you saw the need.
Yeah.
And the need's only growing. I mean, I know the government's saying, hey, homelessness is going down, but
What about mental health?
mental health is a huge one. And that's a whole different discussion. But look how many of us are living paycheck to paycheck, where if you lose your job, what's going to happen? You're going to go to those lineups. You're going to go receive those, social services.
Yeah, or the guys that I know go back selling drugs or something like that.
Well, I know. That's kind of worst case
That's
scenario.
worse, yeah.
But
It is. But I also think that we endorse a recidivist cycle for those who are coming out of incarceration. And I'll put it out on the line this way.
Sure.
So,
Devil's advocate.
Well, so I've been dealing with the government for a long time. So on this podcast, I shut my mouth quite a bit. Okay, because I don't like to be so political about.
Oh, I know it's dangerous.
Certain aspects. So literally what I'm going to say is here in Canada, you cannot be outspoken about the government.
No.
Because if you are outspoken by the government and you're trying to position yourself for a program, what ends up happening is they just cut your funding before you even get off the ground, because they don't like anybody who's critical outside. So as you were saying, it's fundamental that we have all these social programs. 100% I agree. But the problem is you have to follow their indoctrination in order to be able to get your funding.
Yes, I know.
And so this is the issue that I've always, I work in recovery in the context that I help men and women get into treatment.
Yeah.
And I provide an early treatment program, pre-treatment basically, and post-care.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that I've always noticed is that Hope Mission might not work for everybody, just like AA might not work for everybody.
Right.
Okay, NA might not work for everybody, but the problem is because of the way how our healthcare system is. They need a one and done Band-Aid solution because it's wholesale healthcare. And so when the individual is coming into regards or coming to the conclusion that they need treatment for their drug addiction, they only really have four options, because those four options are the options that the health agency, and I'm not saying any names, I'm doing that specifically. The health agency, whether it be federal or provincial, is only allowing those four types of treatment to happen. And so we wonder why, essentially, treatment isn't great. Well, one of the issues is because there's not enough individualism within those programs. And so you can take that as well as some of the housing issues that we have.
Yeah.
Why is it that our housing issues in this city are, it's either you have a place or you don't have a place, just like you were saying, right? So the integrative housing is very difficult in this city, and a lot of that is because it's boom or bust town. Yeah. It's very transient, and this is why the municipality itself and the province within this area, they discern quite a long time within the Edmonton zone.
Yeah. And what's now I'm going to get political, which sucks because I've never won an election, which is okay, and I'm pretty sure I'm never going to run another one again. But housing is the key to ending poverty, homelessness, everything connected with that in that sort of bubble. But you can't have developers who own all this land and say, okay, you know what, we're going to sell you this land, and you're going to come in and build these houses, but you know what, we don't want any social housing.
Yeah.
We don't want, apartments. We don't want to go up. We want to go out because we want more money. And a big part of my campaign was saying, you know what? We already reduce our transient folks, our people with no label, no collar, to downtown. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden it's revitalized and they're out to the trees. Mm-hmm. Honest to God, the trees.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where do you want them to go?
Yeah.
And it comes down to housing. Yeah. I said, you know what? I love Edmonton. I love Alberta. But we have a very big, not in my backyard attitude.
And
I've said this at public forums, so I'm okay with repeating it here. But I've raised millions, okay, from people who want to make a difference.
Yeah.
But the moment I bring out, hey, we're going to build social housing in your area. Oh, no. We're going to vote against it. The community leagues come together. No. Oh. And politicians say, you know what? That's not the right area for it. So what is? Everyone wants that kind of, flow of money, which is okay. And, I probably sound totally insane because, what happens is people who live in a city who aren't, chasing that money or that position will call you insane. But I'm okay because I make a great living, or did before I got laid off, but I have some savings. But it comes down to, if we want to make a difference, we have to integrate everyone into society. And it just becomes one of those things where, sure, we'll take a strip of low-income housing in this neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Or we'll take a strip of this low-income housing in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
But people just, I grew up in low-income housing, and look at me.
Yeah.
I'm a very successful philanthropist. I am probably, without touting my name too much, I probably have a bigger name than any of the people who live in that neighborhood ever will.
Yeah.
But people have this stigma of saying, hey, I'm getting this housing in my neighborhood. There's going to be crime. There's going to be, pillaging. There's going to be, thievery. It's not true. People are just trying to make a living, and especially as Canadians. I love Canadians. People just want to live comfortably.
Mm-hmm.
Can you not give that to them? Like, honestly, a little strip is not going to hurt anybody.
Well, I think so. This is a big piece that people in this city have missed.
Yeah.
Okay. If you really look at CMHC, Canadian Mortgaging Housing Commission, okay, they're basically the people that approve all mortgages in Canada.
Yep.
Okay. So that's actually a Crown corporation, right? There's a thing called mandatory cooperative housing. Cooperative housing in Canada is essentially ghetto living, where the people within that apartment or that townhome structure, whatever it is, they have to basically work in a cooperative fashion to manage that building.
Yeah.
Now it's a sliding scale for rent, and that sliding scale is if you make income, you have to pay full rent. If you're not making income because you're on social assistance, you pay a subsidized rent, and the government pays the rest. Now, if you look at Edmonton has 4 cooperative housing complexes. If you look at Toronto, just Toronto,
I know, yes,
it's thousands of spots. Now, the other thing is being a guy who's worked in housing and integrative housing, I have found apartments from Edmonton Regional Housing, which is basically our ghetto living here in Edmonton, where apartments aren't full.
Yeah.
And then when you call and you ask, and they say, no, that apartment isn't full, but you can see that there's no lights on. Now, this is what I would suggest. I agree with you full 100% that it's housing,
but
it's not really a but.
Okay.
I think the way about going about it is to not condense everybody from the inner city in one specific place. As a matter of fact,
well, that's what I'm working against.
Yeah.
I want to, downtown needs to be a hub for homeless people and people who are down on their luck and stuff like that.
And
I want to expand that to across Edmonton. I want people to go into neighborhood centers and get the services they need in secret. I don't want this to be a huge thing. Like, if you live downtown, you're poor. If you go downtown, you're poor. And
I think one of the places that we can look at is Ottawa. If you look at, so I worked in Ottawa as a housing person for a little while.
Yeah.
In Ottawa, if you're homeless for longer than 3 weeks, that's a catastrophe.
Yeah.
Literally, that's a catastrophe. And by 3 weeks, they're putting you in a hotel room, and the taxpayers in Ottawa are paying for it. Okay. When you want to be a management company like Boardwalk or any of these massive management companies for buildings, so on and so forth, they have to give up 15 to 23% of their rental capacity to subsidize housing only. So they're not allowed to say 95% of the building is only for those who can pay full rent. No, 15 to 23% of your building has to go to subsidized housing. So if they make that as, and that's only on a local level that Ottawa did that. That's not a federal jurisdiction. That's not a provincial jurisdiction. That's what zoning dictated within the city of Ottawa. Yeah. And when they did that, all of the management companies had to basically perk up. Now, the issue that I've always ran into here in Edmonton is it is always not in my backyard. And in the industry of helping people in housing, we actually have an acronym for that. We just break it down, and it's like, not in my backyard is basically the acronym that we have. Yeah. But you'll hear, and this is the other thing is is almost the gatekeeper, and I'm kind of expelling myself by saying this because people can literally draw dots. The gatekeeper to homeless funding for housing is the gatekeeper to which communities get it and which communities don't. And the unfortunates about that is that one executive director is the one who's dictating where the traffic is going through in the city. And that's why I believe what you're saying in the capacity that people need to wake up to what the real problem is. Because when we allot all this power to one person, really their job becomes they are dictated to by their bosses or their public figures that are giving them this position that you're not allowed to put housing in my areas, but you can have it here and you can have it there. And that, again, is social media, that's backlash, that's all these things. And it doesn't allow somebody to be able to be bipartisan in making a choice of where housing is going to go, you know? And that we really have to move away from in this city, you know?
Yeah, you just brought up like 4 different points.
Yeah.
That I want to debate you on, but I don't think we have the time. But honest to God, I think you and I are sitting on the same page for the most, for the most, positive, spin and direction of the government. Because the last thing I want to do is blame our government, because you look at it.
Sure.
Of the world, like what are we, 6th? It was voted, and we are taking steps.
Yeah.
And it just comes down to people like us sitting at this table who are going to fight for our city. And I think, Edmonton in general, we have so many activists. We have so many people fighting for, a new direction of the city.
Inclusion.
Yes. And it just comes down to, honestly, it comes down to, city council, municipal politics. So, you know what? I'm always optimistic, not only about my life, but just, the province and country in general, because I think, eventually people are going to look in on Edmonton because, sure, we're talked about and people look down on us, but, we have a lot of movers and shakers who are making things happen.
Yeah.
And it's just, I'd give it maybe 10, 20 years where we're leading the way on homelessness, and
Yeah, we're close.
And not in my backyard. It's going to be, come in my backyard, and we're going to, maybe it comes with tax incentives and stuff like that. There's so many options, and I'm just kind of like a big idea guy in general, but I think we're going to be okay. It just takes.
It's going to take...
Edmonton's like one of those cities who's, the last to get in line, but has the biggest voice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's kind of like those people who complains about everything. But
I think right now with the economic downturn in Edmonton, this is the best time for us to make policy change.
Yes, I think so. Exactly.
I think we're in a really optimal place in order to do it right now, because there's not so much buy power within money, so to say.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think Edmonton is in a phenomenal place right now in order to be a policy changer.
Yeah.
And by being that policy changer, maybe other municipalities might be able to follow suit. But I also believe that the people in this municipality need to start thinking about what other municipalities are doing.
No.
You don't think so? You don't think?
No, because I know you reference Toronto a lot, and look what's happening to them.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
granted.
Okay.
I agree about Toronto. All I'm saying is to take the good things out of what is working in some of those municipalities and then bring them in.
Honest to God, we have 2 great universities here in Edmonton.
Yeah.
People fly across the country just to go here for a couple months and learn. If we take U of A and Grant Mac and just, those students are brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't claim to be the smartest person on earth, but they see what I'm doing and they say, you know what, Dan, can we make it better? We just have some ideas. And they come to me and boom, here's $100,000 more, $200,000 more.
Yeah.
And I think, this is another tangent, but everyone thinks that, the youth of our society doesn't know anything, when really they're the future. And I think they do know a lot.
Yeah.
And it comes down just to, if it came down, if I was running the province and this was some sort of, dictatorship, I would rely on our universities 100%.
You sound like Trudeau.
Do I? Don't compare me to that guy.
I'm just kidding. Hey man,
Okay.
I don't even like my first name because he fucked it up for me.
I'm not a big Trudeau fan, even though I'm mostly a socialist. What people call me, even though I'm really conservative. But our university students have a lot to offer, and they just have a different way of thinking. Because when I was young, it was a totally different landscape than when they're young.
Yeah.
They have totally different, economic situation, totally different education. We invest more into it. They have more to offer than I ever still do to this day.
Yeah.
And like it or not, they're going to be here long after I'm dead. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's important we invest into them and listen to them and just kind of get their ideas and, maybe train them in a way. But I think, Edmonton is a hub for education. Because look at U of A. #1 university in Canada.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm
Well, it depends who you ask.
I'm a grad from there. So
right. So you're kind of biased.
not in a positive way, but
Oh, okay. No worries. Well, if you don't like U of A, we have Grant Mac, which I'm a grad from. Oh, not grad.
so
but-
I was at U of A
dropped out.
for University of Calgary.
oh, okay, yeah.
So like I was on campus, but most of my programming was from University of Calgary.
Yeah.
I'm a science guy, but I didn't pay for my education. I got
Yeah.
it all for free. I was,
That's
pretty,
not
I was
bad,
pretty
yeah.
lucky. Yeah, I was
Good
pretty
for
lucky.
you.
Yeah, it was all right. So you're talking about these new ideas that are coming from students. Would you be willing to talk about any of these ideas that you've heard that?
Well, yes and no. It's hard because, I'm really, really not concerned about embarrassing them because it is their idea.
You don't have to say their name.
I know, but it comes down to a program because social media,
Yeah.
the media. Can you swear on this
Oh, yeah.
podcast? Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you present, people are going to shit on it.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm
yeah,
sorry for swearing.
Yeah,
but,
no, it's the truth.
And I'm not the right spokesperson. And this is because I do a lot of speeches at university and high school and junior high. I'm not your spokesperson.
Yeah.
Sure, I made, a decent, I created a decent persona here in Edmonton and
Yeah.
Alberta. But when it comes down to it, you guys have much more resources and
Yeah.
talent than I ever had. So, it comes down to that more or less. And then, of course, if you say the idea, it sounds like it's coming from you, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't know. It's just, why we have a lot of movers and shakers
Yeah.
in the city. And I've never claimed to be the best, but I know they're the best. So I want them to move and shake, do everything I couldn't. I'm just a Band-Aid on society's problems, and I'm okay with that. I think that's my position in society.
So, what was the most successful campaign you had completed?
The one that's ongoing. It's not quite completed, the whole Can Mandan campaign. I mean,
Okay.
we raised millions for people in need. I mean, it's... I don't know. I don't like touting my own accomplishments because it's not what I'm here for. I'd rather talk about
Yeah.
other things. But I'm one poor kid who came from a poor family and has raised millions for my community. So I think, and that's still ongoing. This whole province and city has yet to see what I can actually offer now that I'm older, mature, and bumping elbows with these politicians and. You're gonna wait and see. I think I still have my, ace up my sleeve, and then I can die peacefully.
For our listeners, though, can you explain what your campaign is, how you're raising money and food?
Yeah, I just do, events. I hold fundraisers. So, I'll do a winter camp out, or I'll do a boxing match, or a wrestling match, or, some sort of crazy, convoluted stunt, and it gets people to donate. And then I'll drive to Fort Mac and do the same thing. And, it's been successful because, I'm not lying about my backstory. People know my backstory. My, classmates in my school can confirm, everything that I'm telling you because I was, the poor, kid bringing my lunch in a bread bag and was smelly, which isn't bad. And I try to be genuine, and I try to work out of the box, because in Edmonton, Alberta alone, we have thousands and thousands and thousands of nonprofits. And when it comes down to it, is I look at it and I say, well, what can I do different? What can I do to, even though I'm making money for those nonprofits and charities, I'm saying, how can I get that money in? So I do, crazy things. And, some people, this goes back to politics, but, some people call me like a rodeo clown or a circus clown. And that's fine. Maybe I am.
Yeah.
But, whatever it may be, I know I'm doing my part in society, and I'm taking care of my family now, which is the most important, like my mom who's sick and my brother and my girlfriend. And, it comes down to just doing what you can, because life is short, man. I mean, we only have so many, we think, I have 60, 70, 80 years. Every year I wake up, I'm like, it's 2018, it's 2019, it's, when does it stop? I know, it goes so quick.
Yeah.
And so I just really do what I can and block out the negativity and just try to make a difference in my short time in the earth here.
Yeah, it's not what we accomplish; it's the lives that we affect along the way.
Yeah, it's one of those drop a pebble on the thing and it ripples. I know it's one of those
cliche memes.
Exactly,
but it's true.
I think one of the things I remember when Kenny and I had first started, like when he came on actually as a co-creator, the biggest advice I had given him was, because we did our bios, right? On the line. Literally on the line.
I know, you sound like a 95-year-old man.
Well, the issue is you feel like you're putting yourself on the line.
You do, yeah.
Because one of the things that I had suggested to Kenny was, don't lie and tell him the worst shit that you've ever done in your life. Yep. And the reason why is because if you don't disclose it now, the fact of the matter is somebody's going to come up and they're going to say me too on you or whatever the hell it's going to be. And I'm not saying that there's a me too on Kenny or me. I'm just saying all of a sudden something's going to bite you in the ass.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we have to be prepared for, because I don't remember all the bad stuff I've done. I remember the majority of it.
I mean, you were young. Come on.
I was pretty drunk and high a lot of my
helps,
life,
yeah.
right? So like the thing that I had said to Kenny is we have to just make sure that we're ready and willing and capable and ready to be like, yeah, I apologize for that. I truly fucked up in the moment. I didn't mean to do what I had did, and I have honestly changed my life. Yep. Because as much as we say, we've said our bio, the fact of the matter is the listeners have bought in. Like you think about it, there's three of us sitting around this table and it feels like it's us three talking. The reality is by the time this goes out and people listen to it, there's going to be in the first 24 hours, there'll be anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000 people downloading this thing to hear it, right?
Criticizing you.
So, well,
or complimenting you.
So, yeah. So I've been called a misogynist. I've been called many, many things, right? Yeah. But the reality is that's not really who I am, and they're entitled to their opinion, and that's fine. Yeah. It doesn't mean that it's going to change who I am or what I'm doing. I mean, that's the reason why podcasting, in my opinion, is predominantly taking over the radio world. And the reason for that is because I'm not a personification. I'm not a persona on this show.
Exactly.
I am who I am.
And
right?
You know what? I think that's the reason why I'm, a lot of, public figures, they kind of die out within a year or two, maybe make a comeback. Mm-hmm. But I've been relevant since I started.
Yeah.
And that's because I just speak my mind.
Yeah.
I don't lie. I don't go to claim to be someone I'm not. And, I know, do you guys watch Judge Judy?
I have. Not anymore.
Oh, okay.
I have.
She's one of my favorite public figures. And one of her famous mottos is, if you tell the truth, you don't have to lie, which gives you a better memory, right? Because it all connects. So I just go and give my opinion and tell the truth. I mean, I'm not here to, pretend to be, the end all be all of, philanthropists or someone who can change the world. I just come out and tell my story. Yeah. And I think that's important. I think that's what you guys are doing as well. It's just be yourselves. I mean, everyone wants to be, I think this is the culture we live in, but everyone wants to be somebody. Mm-hmm. Everyone wants to mimic somebody. Everyone wants to, try to adapt to that same strategy. Not me. I just
Yeah.
just do whatever the hell I want.
Yeah.
And it works out. And, I have my supporters, and oh God, like you guys, I have sorry, I bumped the mic.
That's okay.
I have my haters. People think I'm just supplying to ungratefuls.
Yeah.
People think I'm just being a Band-Aid, which I am. I can fully admit it. And people think I'm not really making a difference. I'm just encouraging lazy people to continue being lazy. So whatever. I just keep doing my thing.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's still a need. You're still filling a need and a void in the
Yeah,
system.
maybe.
Like, people need that right now to make that transition. One of the things that I was thinking, though, you guys both mentioned on that housing is the most important. I would just have to say I think mental health is the most important,
Yeah, it
opposed
is.
to housing. That if we can create the programs and resources for empowering individuals to break through their chains and barriers of their mental health issues, then we can see some like ongoing consistent changes, ongoing consistent growth of the individuals who were requiring the housing services.
yeah.
So I'm gonna burst a healthcare bubble right now, and this is intel.
Don't do it.
I'm doing it. So here in Edmonton, we have a place called the Royal Alec Hospital, and there's a great big hall that's never been used in there, and they're turning that into a 24-hour 7 drop-in.
Yeah.
They're putting in 30 mental health care workers, which are basically people, if they wanted to leave the healthcare field working for the government, they could actually go and run their own independent clinic, right? So what that's going to cost and they're there 24/7. So when we think about these people working, okay, one, they're not just, you're talking about a $90,000 salary between the time of 9 to 5. Okay, now they're going to be there on a night shift plus a premium, and that's great, right? So a lot of those guys are going to be making about $140,000, $150,000 a year on their night shift alone. Okay, then as well as that, they're going to throw in another 45 peer support workers. Then they're also putting in another 15 social workers. And all these people are on a 4-on, 4-off, 12-hour rotation.
Yeah.
It's a massive amount of spending when it comes to labor. Now, I agree. We need mental health. We need mental health programs just like we need anything else. But it's the same thing that I told Dr. Shapiro. It's great, and you alluded to it before, is that it's great we have free healthcare, but can you afford the medication afterwards? And it's great that we can get mental health programs, but where do we give them the bricks and mortar in order to stabilize their life, in order to continue those programs? And the issue is that wholeheartedly what's happening is, and not just in this government, many governments across Canada, they don't want to pay for bricks and mortar anymore because it costs the government a lot of money. And so right now, what we're going to see in Edmonton is we're not going to see detox centers anymore. They're going away. And the reason why they're going away is because there's only 3 things that can kill you detoxing from drugs and alcohol. One is alcohol will kill you, detoxing in a harsh way. And another one is opiates and opiates. Those are the 2 things that will kill you detoxing in an unmedical place. So what they've transitioned to now is they've transitioned to Suboxone, methadone, and the beer pill. The beer pill is basically essentially a pill that you take where if you drink after you've taken the pill, you vomit.
Yeah.
Okay, that's basically what it is. And the reason why they're going along this line is because they don't want addiction. See, addiction is the bastard child of mental health, and it's always been that way. That's the one piece that they don't want. They don't want to fund next to mental health. There's a hierarchy in the way that they pay. Mental health comes first, then addictions comes later. But the issue is when you look at mental health, addictions is coupled. They're usually hand in hand, and they're one and the same. So now the issue is
kind of. I don't agree, but keep going.
Just saying.
I know.
A lot of people who have addiction issues have a mental health concern.
I know.
Right?
Yeah,
so let's look at it the opposite way of the way that I was saying. The issue that I'm getting at,
I know. Sorry for interrupting.
is people who are in recovery or in early stages of recovery
Yeah.
The one thing that consistently works is the camaraderie in the beginning. That's what we need, men and women. And I'll tell you one thing that I've seen in my time in working with recovering addicts is this. Men get along better than women in a camaraderie setting, but women still get along with each other when they realize
you misogynist
how emotionally
it's not the first time.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's how emotionally and spiritually bankrupt they are. Once they recognize the bankruptcy that they actually have, then they come together. Men are more inclined to have that camaraderie almost embedded in them, and the thing that they're trying to pull away from is that living quarter where they're all together. That's because it costs an astronomical amount of money in order to have the staff, the house, the insurance, the medication, the programs, and then the programs philosophically they change every so often, right? All of a sudden it's not mindful anymore. It now becomes self-talk. And these are all pieces that the mental health care field changes quite rapidly. And when they change these things rapidly, you have to change the philosophy of your program in order to meet that criteria. And this is where our healthcare system gets really jammed up with mental health, is because that stuff changes so rapidly. And the housing piece is gone, right?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
You know, you bring up some good points, and you bring up some points that, don't quite resonate with me, but that's okay. That's what I love about, free speech and democracy. But first and foremost, I am, just as me being a 30-year-old guy, I am absolutely surprised on how long it's taken us to treat mental health as an actual health concern. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, sure, we have these wings of the hospitals who are dedicated to this, but they're almost non-existent.
And in short term.
Yeah. I mean, you have the flu, you go to the hospital.
Well, nowadays, right now, we're just throwing our mental health patients in the remand.
Well, I know. Yeah. And I look at it this way. And maybe, you know what? I'm not a scientist. I'm not a chemist. I'm not a biologist. But your body works, what? Well, say 16 hours a day. It gets 8 hours of rest because you're in bed, besides flipping over, blah, blah, blah. Your brain is constantly going for your whole entire life. Honest to God, minute by minute, whether you're sleeping, you're still dreaming. Your brain is still functioning, still telling your heart to pump, still telling your lungs to breathe in. And yet we treat mental health like it's, something on the back burner, something that you should be ashamed of. And yes, we have these whole mental health days, but that just adds to the stigma. The Bell Let's Talk, it's a great thing. They've raised millions for mental health, but it treats you like some sort of subject, like saying, hey, you're on Facebook saying, you know what, I've been depressed, or I think about suicide, or I think about doing,
There's all the stigma around it that
exactly.
It makes you look and feel weak.
Yeah, and we have, certain people who don't see it. Your brain is running from the moment you're born to the day that you die, but your body actually gets rest.
Yeah.
And your brain's keeping it going. So yeah, you think of a long day at work, 12, 15-hour day at work, I'm lifting concrete, sweeping a broom, I've done it. You get tired. You want to go home and sleep.
Yeah.
But your brain never sleeps. So, lower, I don't know. I'm not sure I have the answer. I'm not even sure the answer has been created for how to treat mental health, but I think we're working on it. But when it comes down to, addictions is, to me, honest to God, and I know I get flack for this all the time because I get hate mail through the roof. I get love letters too, so it's good. But I think addictions is a disease. I don't think it's, necessarily coupled, directly with, mental health. I know people who are making, 6 figures who are addicted to heroin or meth or cocaine.
Yeah.
And it comes down to treating addiction. That's a totally different aspect because people couple it together with mental health all the time when it's not. Addiction is a disease, whether it's alcohol or some sort of pill or some sort of drug that you're putting into your body to change the course of your thinking or your breathing or your mental stability. You know what I mean? It changes you and your mindset. So when it comes down to it, I think I'm a big proponent of these, places, and I'm going to use lamest terms because I'm sure most people are lamest terms. You can go get high for free. You can go in there and the government will pay for you to get high.
Yeah.
I'd rather have that than have somebody who's making six figures and their dad dies.
Yeah.
Their mom dies. You understand what I'm saying? Addiction is a whole different landscape. And once we treat it as a whole different landscape, which is going to be probably in this day and age, 20 years to come, because we're just starting to talk about mental health now, even though we're, millions of years old. It's going to be a while, but you can't link things together because mental health and addiction are two separate things. Being depressed, you know what I'm saying? I know I'm like coupling things together, like I'm saying not to, but it's.
I hear you. It's funny because we just had a show the other day, and the person that was on, we had a big conversation how addiction is not a disease.
Okay, yeah, I'll see, that's where I differ,
But see, then we also had another episode with a fella who has been 44 years in the addiction field.
Yeah,
and so he started with the Canadian Research Clinic of Addiction and Mental Health.
Yeah,
back in '68. And so what he was saying in that episode was called The Evolution of Drug Treatment. And what he was basically saying was at one time they would deal with your schizophrenia and then they would deal with your addiction as bipartisan.
Exactly, yeah.
They're completely different. But then what he was saying is over time, over the 44 years, what they started recognizing is that when they're both together and present with schizophrenia and addiction, they need to be counseled as one. And the reason why he was saying that they needed to be counseled as one was because some people will go to or revert to drug addiction, and more specifically with schizophrenia.
Right.
Okay. The reason why they'll go to the drug addiction is because the drug addiction, they don't feel the dopamine that happens because there is a chemical imbalance. And so what this fellow was saying, Chris Suchit, who's been on the show a couple times now, that was basically his thought when he said, when we transitioned from dealing with it as compartments into dealing with it as a whole picture, he's like, when people have schizophrenia coupled with an addiction, so they are using some sort of substance on the street, he said we see less relapse of schizophrenics or people with bipolar when we deal with it as one whole issue.
And honestly, he could be right. Maybe he is right. Probably he is right. I don't know. I just deal in my line of service with a lot of people who have addictions on the streets. I go out and give them different things, and I'm not a doctor.
Yeah,
I didn't even graduate university, so this is why I think it's going back to the whole political realm. I think this is why we get actual people who excel in those fields to get their advice from, instead of some diplomat saying, no, you know what, addiction comes from a mental illness, or because they're barbarians who don't want to contribute to society, right?
Well, and I think the thing is too, and I'll suggest this to you.
Yeah.
When I was working in the in the shelter, right? What ends up happening is you only see a certain case microcosm.
Exactly. Yeah.
This fellow, what he's basing his opinion on, or his professional opinion, is seeing the success of after.
Yeah.
And you and I don't get to see those guys who are successful after because they're not on the street anymore. So I get where you're coming from, and I respect that bias because it is a bias. When we're always frontline workers, what ends up happening with frontline workers is we see the repetitiveness of that, and we don't actually get to see the successes a lot of times. And sometimes we do, but sometimes we don't.
You want to see the best in people, which is what it comes down to, because when it comes down to people, you always want the best for them.
Yeah.
Even if they're these drug dealing, drugged up, even murderers, we try to rehabilitate. And it just comes down to just humanity. I think that's kind of maybe my heart gets in the way of my brain sometimes, and maybe because I didn't graduate university, and perhaps. And it's one of those things where that's where I love humanity, because it's so interesting just to watch and study and talk about things. And I think, just before you talk here, sorry,
that's
feel
okay.
like I'm interrupting. When people, in Alberta especially, you voted in this socialist government, conservative dynasty after 44 years. I don't know if social media has anything to do with it, but I think we're all expecting just results overnight. Like, hey, a study is one day, and I think that's where it gets lost in translation with a lot of people is this is building 40 years.
Yeah.
We can't tap into his brain until we actually talk to him and observe his habits and understand what's going on. But people, hey, he's addicted. Well, give me a week, 7 days. Yeah. That's not realistic. So it's one of those things where I love being human, but I hate being human, and it's just I don't know. It's weird.
I think it's one of these things too, and I think it's one of these things too. What the podcast has actually brought me, because we have so many different people coming in. Mm-hmm. My perspective has changed on certain things because of the people that have been sitting across that table, right? Mm-hmm. And so when that ends up happening, I always say, it's not bad to abandon an idea. No. You know, and I always used to use my ideology as almost my identity at one time. A couple of years ago before this, I did that more.
Well, that's where you get extremists, right? That's where people who just refuse to bend, and it hurts society more than it helps society, right? You got to, if you're not evolving and learning, you're dying. Yeah. So I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're gonna have to wrap it up. We're in overtime now.
Are we? Oh,
so
this has been interesting. I actually had fun today.
So I hope that this is a part one of a part two. Hopefully, we'll be able to get you back.
That's up to you guys and your producers and everything. And
yeah, there's lots of stuff that we didn't even touch on yet.
I know
there is. I think we could probably go on for another hour, but we'll wrap it up here. So. Please subscribe to www.lifeonlifestermspodcast.com. That's where you can become a Pride member. You would also get all of our updates, new episodes that are coming out, and things that are coming up for the next month, the theme, so on and so forth. You can also get our blog, which is the afterthought after the show, and it's a fun place to be. We built that website for you guys. It's your virtual place. You can dialogue with us, interact with us, and tell us what you thought about the show, as well as you can get in contact with us one-on-one. Please share, subscribe, and tell all your friends about this wonderful show, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Have a good one.
Bye.